Hello everyone, welcome back to the homestead. As requested, we are doing a cooking video today, and it's going to be focused on this giant mystery squash. Just for reference, you can tell the size. If you followed us through the summertime, you know that I planted a butternut, or what I thought was a butternut, and we ended up getting these giant mystery squashes. So I still don't really know exactly what the variety is. I thought they weren't going to be very good, so my plan was to just feed them to the animals through the winter. And the first one that we baked as part of our test for sustainable food for our birds, it was so delicious. So we're not going to be feeding these to the birds, we're going to be eating them. And so today we're going to be showing you 3 different things that we made out of one of these giant squash. So the first thing we did is we separated out all of the seeds. Well, we cut the squash in half first, of course, and then separated out all of the seeds, kind of rinsed them off. I set a few aside to save for next year so we can plant this again next year. And then we just kind of fried those seeds in a little bit of butter, and I put some salt and onion and garlic on them. Got them nice and kind of dry, crunchy, toasty. They were so good. What do you think? Are they yummy?
Yeah.
Not quite enough for the whole family to get a bunch, but everybody got to have at least a little bit. It was a fun snack. And so then I actually had to cut this squash into 4 different chunks, and it just barely fit into my largest baking dish. And stuck it in the oven as quick as I could in the morning time early. It didn't cook fast enough though for our second dish, which was going to be breakfast porridge. So I actually had to pull some of it out and kind of steam boil a little bit of it so that we could have breakfast before lunchtime. My oven is not always as hot as it needs to be to cook a squash quickly. So anyway, we made some squash porridge, and all I did was, once the squash was softened, strain the water, of course, and then I like to use my stick blender to get it all nice and smooth. And then to that I added some collagen powder for a little extra protein, a little bit of salt, some maple syrup, cinnamon, lots of cinnamon, about 2 cups of almond flour, some butter, and then we topped it all with a little bit of granola, which is not necessary, but a few in our family are not super fond of squash porridge. It makes them feel like they're eating baby food. And so putting some granola on top helps to make it enjoyable for everyone. And adding the almond flour does give it more of a porridge texture as well. What do you think? Do you like it better with or without the almond flour? Kind of without, huh?
Sometimes, yeah.
She's one of the ones that doesn't really mind the texture so much, and you kind of prefer it without the texture of the almond flour, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes I put almond flour, sometimes I don't. It's really just preference, and I don't really measure any of these ingredients either. I just put stuff in and taste it and add whatever else we need to add to it. Usually almost always add more cinnamon. But the squash was actually really sweet on its own, so it didn't take much sweetener at all. Some people would probably just opt to have no sweetener, and so yeah, it's one you can really get creative with. If you like raisins or dried cranberries or pecans or walnuts, any of that would be really good to throw in this porridge. All right, on to the third dish that we made out of this giant squash, was squash pie. And this ended up being more like pumpkin pie in flavor, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah.
Than any other squash we've done. For the squash pie, I let the rest of the squash bake until it was nice and soft and I could spoon it out of the skin. And I actually let it just sit and strain some of the water out, because for the pie you don't want it to be too wet. So I let it sit for a few hours, and the water just kind of separates out of the squash a little bit, and you can dump it out, reuse it somehow if you want to. I also stick blended it again for the pie. You don't have to do that, but if you prefer it more smooth and less stringy, you can do that. And then to the squash pie, I added a lot of the same ingredients as the porridge, but a little different. Cinnamon, ginger, cloves, cardamom, all ground of course, a little bit of stevia, some coconut palm sugar, a little bit of sea salt, and then of course eggs. But what I like to do for the pie is to first mix all the other ingredients except for the eggs and taste it. You want it to be just the right flavor, but maybe just a little bit too strong. And then I mix in the eggs. And I usually do about 1 egg per cup of squash mixture. And this time I made it really thin because it happened to be a pretty warm day, and we don't like to get our cook stove going too hot when it's a warm day. So I put it in the same huge baking dish and it made it really thin, and that way it cooked a lot faster on a lower temperature.
Does this help your skin?
It does help your skin.
In the jungle where nobody goes, there's a big gorilla washing his clothes. Boom, boogie, roar, boom, boogie, roar, boom, boogie, roar, boom, boogie, roar. That's the way he washes his clothes.
And I actually almost forgot to get a video of the finished product. We ate it so fast. And then for topping, we like to do things like sour cream with a little maple syrup in it. So we call it sweetened sour cream. You could do a whipped cream, applesauce. Have we done anything else on top of this?
We just did honey butter.
Oh yeah,
maple butter.
Mix like some butter, melt some butter and mix some honey or maple syrup in it. Yeah, or you can just eat it plain. That's good that way too.
Yep.
And again, I don't have measurements for this. I do it by taste. So like I said, I put all the ingredients in with the squash, taste it, then add the eggs and bake it like you would a pumpkin pie basically until it's slightly firm even in the center. I think we have a few more of these to cook, and then we also have a couple of our giant zucchino rampicante squashes, which I will probably use in the same way as I did this squash. I think our favorite things are the squash porridge and the pies. However, there's lots of other ways you can use squash like this. The zucchino rampicante is actually particularly good for doing more of a savory, like fried squash and onion dish. You can add them to soups. Sometimes I'll add some of the mashed squash to things like cookies or cakes. Of course, you can make sweetbreads out of it. There's a lot that you can do with winter squash, and it's just such a great food to have because you don't have to do anything to preserve it. You just put it on your shelf, and if you've got a pantry shelf or a basement shelf or a garage shelf that doesn't freeze, it's super easy. So we like winter squash.
Yep.
I do want to say one thing about some winter squash. This particular winter squash is a serious vining plant. It kept going for, I don't know, like 30 feet. And that's actually a really good thing for where we live, where we have a lot of squash bugs and boreworms. So if it's a squash that can grow really fast and continue to put down roots as it grows along the ground, it can kind of outrun some of those pests. And that's what this one did. Even though the actual start of the plant died, it kept growing and rerooting in the ground as it went. And so the plant continued to survive and thrive.
Yep.
All right, so I think that's it for today. Thank you for joining us. I want to give a quick thank you before we go to Rose for 2 different things. She gifted me with a bread box that I actually had on my wish list and never thought I would get. Thank you, Rose, for this bread box. It seems like, yeah, too beautiful for our house. It's so lovely, and it's a nice big bread box that fits at least 2 loaves. I could probably fit 3 in there very easily, and so far it looks like it's working great. The bread saves and is really nice and fresh, kept in the bread box. So I won't have to buy disposable bread bags anymore. Huge blessing. Thank you, Rose. And then thank you also to Rose for this book. It's the Living Soil Handbook, the No-Till Grower's Guide to Ecological Market Gardening by Jesse Frost. He has a YouTube channel, and I've learned quite a bit from him. I figure if someone's doing market gardening, they've probably got a lot of really efficient systems in place and know what they're doing. And so I'm really looking forward to learning even more through this book. I'm really interested in living soil and how to make our soil as healthy as we can. So thank you, Rose. I really appreciate this book.
Thank you also to our patrons who make these videos possible.
Yes. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell so that you won't miss our videos. Until next time, we pray blessings over you and yours. And whatever you do, do it with your whole heart.